In recent months, I've decided that I want a new personal laptop that I can daily drive again. And I went with a ThinkPad T480 that I acquired secondhand, that I don't care that it's from 2018 because it's a good laptop. And I have basically fallen in love with the damn thing. It's a great laptop. Just the thing is, I have other computers, and specifically other ThinkPads that I have yet to look at, such as a ThinkPad R51, an interesting computer for its position in time. So what was it like, and how well does it hold up and whatnot? Let's get started. So we need some history. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this history and context bit because, as you can clearly hear, I am not feeling well, and I also did not have a lot of time to do research beforehand because of schoolwork, and so we're going to make this simple, quick, yet also worth your time. After IBM's early failures in laptops, making them one of the last major manufacturers to be selling laptops with a PS Note in the 90s, they decided to take a bit of an interesting gamble and released 3 laptop models in 1992, developed by IBM's Yamato facility in Japan, because of course all great things come from Japan. The 300, 700, and 700C models were aimed at being some business machines, and put some emphasis on business, because they got creative when initially marketing these things, knowing that they were going up against the Compaq LTE and Apple PowerBook, which were both major players, and so they had early test pilot systems and loaner systems. One of these showcased the ruggedness of these computers, as it was sent to help archaeologists uncover an ancient Egyptian city. Due to all this stuff and being successful in these things, it proved to sell well and got a whole lot of awards. The success of the IBM ThinkPad was further proved by the fact that in Christmas of 1992, President of the United States at the time, George H.W. Bush, wanted a Christmas present for his wife, the First Lady of the United States at the time, Barbara Bush. This Christmas present was a ThinkPad 700C. Only problem was, good old George here couldn't find a ThinkPad 700C. So he did a thing and got on the phone with IBM's CEO and had a ThinkPad 700C sent straight from the assembly line to the White House. The ThinkPad 3XX and 7XX models were relatively popular as twin flagships, I guess, and in 1998, IBM first experimented with putting letters in the product name with the I series. While infamous in retrospective, the I series was notable enough that IBM continued to put letters in the product name with the T series and A series in 2000. The A series was replaced by the R series, which is in turn based off of the T series, and this gets to April of 2004 when the T42 is adapted into the R51. And this was one of the final proper IBM ThinkPads. It wasn't the final designed or announced ThinkPad before IBM sold its PC division to Lenovo, as the final designed one was the T43, while the final announced ThinkPad before the announcement of the sale was the G41 in October of 2004. As such, this places this PC in a bit of an interesting state that we'll look at later. As for some press insight into this thing, CNET's writer said that it focused on function while being a boring system and provided a score of 7.4 out of 10. PC Mag was not very lenient on the other hand, stating that the R51 was lackluster compared to the ThinkPad T series or the HP Pavilion DV1000. And so, I suppose you should probably look at this thing proper now. Regarding the exterior, the casing is in a matte black finish with some battle scars from over the years, with some blue highlights in the inside. I got this specific ThinkPad back in January of 2025 and subsequently made videos on its acquisition and restoring it to its factory OS, albeit in a foreign language, back in February and March, respectively. This one also has a Pentium M, 512MB of RAM, an 80GB hard drive, which is a Hitachi Travel Star. It's kind of loud, and integrated graphics. As for all the ports and whatnot, on the right hand side, there's the hard drive slot, the disk drive, and VGA. On the rear, we have the battery, a C port, and parallel port. And on the left hand side, there's the Kensington lock, 2 USBs, an S-video, the modem port, the Ethernet port, headphone and microphone jacks, mini FireWire, and a PC card slot. And on the bottom, there's also a docking port. Alright, now, so I found an interesting thing with the labels. So it's kind of hard to read, but if I go to here, you can see manufactured for Lenovo. You may think, oh, well, this is an IBM computer. It's not a Lenovo thing. I mean, technically you're right, it's an IBM ThinkPad R51. However, I did notice this on the serial number thing. So this is type 1830 that was manufactured in, presumably, May of 2005. So this likely was built in the days or weeks after the decision was made and was finalized. The decision was finalized around the same time that this PC was built, presumably. That being said, I don't know what the given day this thing was built on. I don't think that's always given out. I also want to point out that over here you could see there's like a chart thing to tell you what screws go where, and there's also numbers for each screw size, which I find extremely convenient. And I kind of wish they had stuff like this on newer ThinkPads if it weren't for the fact that, well, my T480 uses captive screws. Alright, now it's time for the very fun task of figuring out what screw shape we need. You know, something tells me this may not be the right screw size. What? Oh my god, this is a very... No, it's not. I just want to show the memory door, if that's even the memory door. Okay, let's try another size. Let's try this one, the largest JIS one. I don't care that these are probably Phillips heads, but it feels a bit more right. Let's see. This is a spot to put more RAM. There's no RAM in here. That's interesting. Oh, it seems more cooperative once I'm putting it back in there. Alright. Anyway, interestingly, between the top and the bottom, you can actually see the actual display connector, which is interesting because this isn't the case on newer ThinkPads. I know this because I have a newer ThinkPad, and if you look at like any laptop from the time, like the Toshiba Tecra A8, even though I know it's a slightly later model, it's still relatively contemporary, it doesn't have something like this. On the keyboard, there are buttons for Access IBM, a help center thing, and it's supposed to be what you hit when you in order to interrupt startup, but doesn't usually provide a consistent uniform response afterwards. The volume control and the power buttons. The nipple's also not here, which honestly kind of sucks, although I don't really care too much. I should also say that this thing is worn down slightly over the years. The trackpad buttons feel kind of plasticky and not really my cup of tea compared to the aforementioned Toshiba Tecra, although honestly that may be nostalgia bias. And the bezel trim piece feels slightly loose at the top. I mean, it's not the most problematic thing, at least for now, and while the plastic is still strong enough. But I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on how long or how far into the future, that there might need to be some 3D printing going on with some of these things like bezels. Remember, manufacturers, always give your plastic enough calcium. Anyway, last but not least, before I actually look at the software, I want to bring up that below the screen we have the wireless numbing caps lock, disk, power, battery, and sleep mode lights. You can actually see two of these, namely the battery and sleep mode icons, when the thing is closed, which looks kind of futuristic and is kind of my cup of tea, because I like futuristic looking things. Our screen size is roughly 15 inches, which is acceptable for me, and so I think that without further ado, we should go power this thing on. As with any old ThinkPad, I have put Ubuntu on here. Not saying there's too much wrong with Windows. Honestly, I feel like I might want to put a Windows Linux dual boot on here at some point in the future for reasons I will get into later. Now I should mention, as you can clearly see, I've raised this thing a slight bit since its last appearance back in July with that video on the same OS. For one thing, I've got background, and for another thing, yeah, so I haven't done anything about that like file manager thing I didn't like, but honestly I don't really care. Overall, I'm not really gonna get too in-depth on the different programs this thing comes with. I'm going to only give you a brief recap of some of the software that this came with because I didn't install anything extra on here and I only have some games that I have to compile for this. And so yeah, let's go do that you know, I'm gonna get give me a second, I'm gonna get a throat drop. Anyway, to give you a brief recap from the Ubuntu 4.10 video, some of the programs this thing comes with, and hence why I haven't gone through the effort to install additional programs on here, include Firefox, GIMP, and OpenOffice. Also, interestingly, there were some IRC and instant messaging clients packed in, but those really aren't of need at the moment. And now this is normally where I would look at things like a YouTube video or games, except there's a slight problem. I don't have this thing hooked up to the internet internet, and I haven't tested this thing yet with my USB thing. And in terms of games, I couldn't get any legitimate non-bundled games onto here. I was gonna try FreeCiv, Quake, and Tux Racer. However, with FreeCiv and Quake, I, for the love of me, could not compile them offline, didn't have time to see if they could work with online libraries, and with Tux Racer, I didn't even try. This is where I bring up that whole, I wish I could probably have a Linux Windows dual boot on this thing because of gaming. Now, Linux gaming has improved a lot over the years, and I'll admit that a lot. Just ask Valve. But for Ubuntu on this hardware, in order to compile some stuff, I'm gonna need the internet. You know what? Let's see if we can actually connect this thing to the internet. Alright, so let's go back to that. So, for some context, this is a USB that I use for when I do a lot of networking things for in the event that a computer very likely doesn't have its own Wi-Fi driver. But this USB is from 2008 and I use it on like a lot of computers. The problem is, my drivers I have available for it are for Windows. And while those drivers do support a wide variety of OSs, from Windows 2000 to Windows 7 as far as I've tested, I haven't checked to see if there's a Linux driver. And also, on the topic of that, if there was a Linux driver, I'm not 100% confident that it would support this version of Linux, because it's from 2004. I mean, I looked in the device manager, it does recognize the device, but it doesn't have a driver, and if I go to here, this is for wireless stuff. No wireless devices. So, yeah. Given that we need library stuff to compile things like FreeCiv and Quake, I don't have any high hopes for being able to do that kind of stuff, because I tested that yesterday and it didn't work. So, yeah. And that's that. My honest thoughts is that despite the slight rundown state and the startup interrupting inconsistencies, it's honestly not that bad. That being said, I don't have access to decent materials to use to test this thing, as I couldn't get a network driver for this thing, and even if I would, the browser that I'd be using is old enough to probably drink. But honestly, it's a ThinkPad, so it should probably serve you decently well if you go with one. These things have a reputation for being some of the best laptops on the market, regardless of the time frame, assuming that the time frame you're talking about had ThinkPads on the market, i.e. starting in 1992 onwards. Anyway, with this computer out of the way, I should probably look at a couple other units in my collection, since I suppose it could probably be worth some interesting material for the next couple weeks to entertain ourselves before we have to make the Windows 10 video.